So this is a slide. The beer from out here is a marketing slogan for Big Bend Brewing Company from West Texas, specifically Alpine, Texas. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, near Marfa. If you've ever been to Big Bend, you know what I'm talking about. But it's truly epic and really undescribable. This is a photo showing some mountain range. And for that reason, Big Bend was like a magical brewery, but they also presented some logistic issues just in terms of distribution and visitation. So when I was working at Gorilla Suit, we had the pleasure of taking on Big Bend as a retainer client, and they came to us looking for help to elevate their brand and become ubiquitous throughout the entire state of Texas. At that point, they weren't distributing to Houston or Dallas or San Antonio, but you could find them in Austin and near Alpine, where they're from. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at the brand that we inherited as an agency, a design agency. And this was their lineup of beers and the brand that they had, which, it's not bad. But we saw room for improvement, namely looking at these cans, you don't even know who made them. Each type of beer has its own logo, which would be a little problematic in terms of scaling up. Like, you have to invent a new logo each time, which could be done, but we wanted to just think through this. And then also the confusion of having 3 different Tejas beers amidst this lineup. It's kind of messy, and also the logo isn't great. So if we check out the next slide, they didn't come to us asking us to do a redesign. It was something that we wanted to do. The logo on the left was the original logo, but then we were able to massage it a little bit into this middle version. And we actually went out on spec and just redesigned their brand without them giving us any money or asking us to, and arrived at this logo on the right. And the work that you're going to see here was done collectively, collaboratively, we arrived at this logo on the right. And then if we check out the next slide, this is sort of the system that allows the brand to flex. And then moving along, we redesigned their cans. And you can see here, there's a clear distinction between what is called Big Bend Brewing Company and then Tejas. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit. And then on the next slide, this was like a little representation of how we were thinking about the brand, thinking of Tejas as this mainstream beer competing with the big boys like Lone Star, Budweiser, Coors, Michelob Ultra, things that were easy drinking, super mainstream, and then laddering up to craft beer with the classic line, which is the craft core, and then seasonal beers and what we called lab beers, which are kind of one-offs, so just lower scale production, but super fancy and more niche. So that's how we sort of repositioned the brand. And then if we go to the next slide, these are some postcards that went out with this like influencer kit that we put together with there's like a custom cooler and 6-packs and these postcards. And this was just like, hey, this is the new face of Big Bend. Maybe you've heard of us before. Here's what we look like now. And we're really leaning into the landscape, where they came from, and that's represented by Big Bend Brewing Company beers, the classic craft beers. But then Tejas Beers represents all of Texas, and that's how we framed up this brand. And if you click the next slide, this is just like the flagship classic line of beers. Big Bend Brewing, beer from out here, West Texas, super craft, amazing beers. And then the next slide shows Tejas. This is for everyone. This is, more drinkable, and it's more of a brought to you by Big Bend Brewing Company.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but does Tejas mean something? Is that a word that means something, or that's just a brand name?
It's a brand name. It's Texas in Spanish. So
This is a Spanish.
What you don't see.
The original Texans were called Tejas.
Okay,
And
thanks.
that's what they were known for. I literally only know this because I just finished a book about Sam Houston and his revenge against Santa Clara and the Alamo.
So you're seeing the cans here as we sort of launch them. I'll show you a little bit of an evolution later, because still looking at this, it's like, what is Negra? What is Clara? And it says it on the side of the can, but we made it more obvious later. And then if you click through, just like new web, and then moving along. So this is just sort of the breadth of work here, where if we kind of skip through the next few slides, there's merch. I like these because they're these little enamel pens, and we found some vintage pens. I forget what they were. Maybe it was Coors. It was like some rad little pens that we use for inspiration to, these are pretty tiny, like an inch tall or so with the little pens, but they turn out super cool. And then on the next slide, home of the world's best Hefeweizen, they took the World Beer Cup gold medal for Hefeweizen. And this is competing against, German breweries. Thankfully, we had a German brewmaster who just crushed it. He was amazing. He is amazing. So we made these coasters promoting, and postcards promoting their Hefeweizen, and we sort of started letting that beer lead the show for the craft line. And then if we skip along, this is like some one-offs. This is like super limited, 214 bottles. It's like a really sick label that we printed on black paper, or like we dyed the paper black, and then copper foil stamp, and then a wax dip, which Big Ben did by hand. They were so bootstrappy and DIY, and they just like had that as ingrained into their DNA. They just like did stuff themselves. It was super cool. And then the next slide is another one-off beer called Old Love. There was an event because on Valentine's Day every year in Valentine, Texas, there's like population 417, but they had this concert and like dancing and beer fest every year on Valentine's Day, and Valentine people would come out from all over the place, and we would always have a specialty beer and like some kind of artwork. So this is a poster that was created for this beer. And then on the next slide, you can see the tap handle system that was developed. And then moving along, we went out and went out to these special places in Texas because that's what Tejas is about. It's about doing stuff, being active in Texas. So into this watering hole, we brought a canoe and we staged this shot, which is on the left. And then you can see how it became a vertical one-page ad on the right. Life Wide Open is some tagline that we came up with. And we're really starting to spell it out here. Like Tejas Negra, it's a Mexican-style amber lager. Clara is a Mexican-style lager. And then Prima is an American lager. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in